Before we get into today's episode, I want to share with you a new platform that I am loving, and it's called Buy Me a Coffee. Essentially, it's a way for creators to accept support from their community through donations. So if you're loving the Black to Business podcast and us producing these amazing shows weekly, you can simply show us support by visiting buymeacoffee.com/Black to Business. Once you're on the website, you have the option to give a one-time donation or a recurring donation. And no matter how big or small, we appreciate you. And if you don't have it to give, we totally understand. I honestly wanted to share this because not only is it a way for you to support us through donations, but you can also show support without spending a dime by using that same link, buymeacoffee.com/Black to Business. And we're also going to list it right here in the show notes. But you can also use that same link to sign up for your own account, and it serves as a referral link for us. So maybe you will find it helpful for your business to offer it as a way for your community to support you. If you're able to donate to us and sign up for your own account, even better, because that sounds like a win-win to me. Now let's get into today's episode. You're listening to the Black to Business podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Happy September. So it's the first day of the month, and you likely noticed that the intro was a bit different, and that's because this episode is extra special, and the reason why is because it's a solo episode. Now, I've been saying that I want to record more solo episodes, but honestly, I think I enjoy doing solo episodes when I'm led to do them. So today's one of those days, and I want to first share with you the reasons why I decided to start this month off solo. So, of course, this is the last month before Q4 of 2022, and it's also a reminder that the new year is just around the corner. So I'm sure as a business owner, you've likely already got 2023 planned. So I see you overachiever, and I love it. But if you don't, I am not here to judge because I've been there, and I want to let you know that this episode is for you either way. So today I'm going to share with you some of the ways to get organized in your business and avoid overwhelm so that you can prepare for Q4, but also 2023, and also make some shifts in your business if you're feeling like you're in a season of maybe a rut or overwhelm. So this is for you definitely. Now, I will say that this episode is going to be, I have some notes, so it's going to be a little bit of uncut, but I have some notes to give you some value. So I wanted to do this because not only are we going into a new quarter, new year, and I want you to put on your CEO hat and be prepared, but also being organized is something that I've noticed I'm getting better at. And other people have been telling me that they think I'm very organized. So I say that because not only is it something that I think that I've improved at, but it's something that other people have brought to my attention. And I don't know if you're anything like me. Sometimes I'm usually just so busy working that I don't always notice progress. A few things I work with clients one-on-one, helping them get clarity in their business. And one of the things that they always tell me is that you're so organized. How do you get all of this together? Like my systems and my processes. And one of the things I tell them is it took me time. So don't think it can happen overnight. At least it didn't for me. And also another thing is that my team is growing at Black to Business. So now I'm in a season of delegating more now than ever. So that's the thing that has allowed me to realize how organized I've gotten, and also the importance of how organized you should be. And it's also allowed me to not be as overwhelmed as I used to be. And I've been doing this for years. So if you're just starting out, again, it takes time. I am not one of those people that things happen for overnight. So if you're just starting, give yourself some grace. But one of the things I like to say is, like Drake says, a couple things do always get it done. So let's talk about some of the mistakes I used to make. So one of the things I used to make, and it's important for you to know yourself, is that I used to I used to make the mistake of not transferring all the information into my calendar. So for example, I would write something down and I would have it in Google Calendar, but I'm also a person that likes a physical planner. So I wouldn't write down things in my physical planner that I might have in my Google Calendar or vice versa. So that was a big mistake I used to make. That is something I do definitely now. And another thing is that I used to plan to get everything done on a project in one day. So now what I do is I brainstorm. I take a day to brainstorm. If I have the capacity to, I might write some notes and edit at the same time. But I also do in different increments or different days. I'll brainstorm a day. Then the next day I might edit. Then the next day it might be review. So I'll give you an example. With the Black to Business podcast, one of the things I used to do a lot is try to handle, especially when I was doing everything myself, is I would try to handle the writing the show notes. I would record the episode, I'd edit the episode, then I post the episode all in one day because I'm like, this is my way of getting everything done. And what I realized is that caused not only overwhelm for me, but when you brainstorm one day, sometimes going back to that, you might want to take out something or add something that you forgot to add. So that's something that I used to make the mistake of doing. Another thing is being a perfectionist, which I think led to me being a procrastinator. The good side of being a very organized person is I've always heard that I was very detail oriented. And what I think about detail oriented, I think that's a great thing. But sometimes it had that thought in my mind, like, you're trying to make this perfect. And a lot of times what happened is I wouldn't do that thing that I needed to do. So those are a few of the mistakes that I used to make. And some of the things I do now, these are just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to get into a lot more of these later. But I want to give you a quick overview of those things. So things I do now is, even when I feel like I want to be there more for people who are, friends, family, one of the things so I won't get overwhelmed is one day I let my family know, I let my friends know. At first I didn't have any boundaries. I said, hey, if you want me to show up for you, and I'm good at, for the most part, at showing up for people, but it's something that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overwhelming myself in order to show up for people. So what I did was I said, hey, if you have something coming up, let me know. I want to be there for you. I just need you to give me a 2-week notice so that I can show up for you. And people respected that call. They were like, I love this, because you do have some people who, give you things last minute and you still go. But then in your head, you're like, why did you tell me this last minute? And so a lot of times when you're saying yes to something, when they say you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So when people are doing things last minute and maybe it takes you need an advance notice, you still wanting to show up says, yes, I'll show up for you, but I'm saying no to this thing that I could have been doing in the meantime. So you just let them know, hey, this is what works for me, 2-week notice. And what I found is that people, they aren't offended when you aren't able to make it, and they are more understanding. So that's some of the things that I do now to avoid overwhelm, especially managing a business. And another thing that I do, and it works for me, so again, these are things that have been working for me, is sometimes, keyword sometimes, I like to send lengthy emails because I read lengthy emails and I appreciate lengthy emails. Now, what I'll say about this is I like to send lengthy emails with substance. And the reason why I do this is because, so for example, trying to give you an example of what we use, I'll use the podcast as a reference because that's one of the main pieces of Black to Business. When it comes to onboarding podcast guests, we are in constant communication with them. But one of the things is some of our emails are pretty lengthy. We include, instructions, and we include these in threads. But what I find is that the more information you give someone, it's a reference point for, them to go back and look at, or they have all the answers that they need. And it minimizes the amount of admin tasks that you have to do. So imagine not giving someone a lot of direction and them coming back and going back and forth with you in these short emails. That's a lot of admin work, and you all know about, taking your focus off a task and the amount of focus and work it takes to get back into focus. So the way that you do avoid doing that is sending those lengthy emails when necessary and when they make sense to those people or the other person on the other side. So that's one of the things that I do. I send lengthy, detailed emails, and I also read lengthy, detailed emails as well. Another thing that I do right now is that I schedule and batch record. So this is something that I've talked about with guests and also on some prior episodes, solo episodes. But this is something that has allowed me not to be as overwhelmed in my business. I batch record my podcast episodes. So for example, I'll dedicate 2 to 3 weeks for just podcast recording. And then whatever else I'm able to do during that time, I'm able to do it. But blocked off my calendar is 2 to 3 weeks. And I put in time slots and allow guests to, schedule times with me. And that's really worked for us to be 2 to 3 months ahead in podcast recording. Another thing I mentioned before is I use a physical planner. I'm a person that understands that if I'm online all the time or on my phone all the time, sometimes that causes distractions and that causes procrastination, which could then lead to overwhelm. So one of the things that I do is I'm a person that likes pen and paper. I buy a physical planner every year. And so what I'll do is I'll write things in my planner and then I'll transfer those things over to my Google Calendar. And these are the ways that I'm able to stay organized when it comes to planning things. And on top of that, you want to get tools that allow all your calendars to sync. So for example, for scheduling, we use Acuity. For scheduling our guests, Acuity syncs with Google Calendar, which anything in Google Calendar, I transfer it over to my physical calendar. So you want to make sure that a lot of your tools are in alignment, or if they are not, make sure that you are transferring that information to where it needs to be transferred to if it's not automated. And of course, I schedule everything. What gets scheduled gets done. So again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to get into these things a little more later. And as I mentioned before, I'm in a space where I want to do solo episodes when I'm led to do them and when I find that the information can be valuable to you. So now let's dive deeper into some of my tips on how I stay organized and give you a sneak peek behind how I run Black to Business. Now, these things are in no particular order, but things I think are important to share. Start off with operating in seasons or projects. So I think one of the things you have to realize is that thinking about what's important now is important, because when you think about what's important now, you need to focus on that and do that thing well. So it's essentially important when you're first starting a business or you're in this state of overwhelm or just in a rut in your business. You want to think about what's most important for you to reach that goal that you have in your business. So in this case, when I say operate in seasons, seasons, fall, summer, spring, winter, is short term. I think about it in terms of short term goals. So you want to think about what's important for you now. What's that short term goal that will lead you to accomplish that bigger long term goal? So for example, there's another service I wanted to introduce into Black to Business, but the priority for me at the moment in terms of short-term goals to lead to that bigger term goal is partnerships, sponsorships, which is financial. And then another thing was finalizing my course that I have been working on, because that's making an impact for my audience. That is the sole reason why we do what we do in Black to Business, to help people start and scale their businesses, so that a course will allow me to do that and reach more people. So again, I wanted to introduce the service into Black to Business, but my main priority was getting these partnerships, getting these sponsorships, and then also creating a course, finishing out our course that we have coming out. And I had to think about what can be placed on hold. And that was the service that I wanted to offer. So what I did was I did some restructuring. I wrote things out on my calendar and said, hey, in 2023, this is when we can introduce it. And then it's about getting ahead of the curve. This is also great advice to operate in seasons or projects if you are someone who is working and managing your business at the same time, especially if you're working full time. My advice is that you want to plan your exit strategy. If that is your plan to work for yourself full time, you need to think about getting your offers in order. What's that one solid offer that you can have that'll allow you to get that financial breakthrough and that recurring money? And also you want to spend the time and money if needed and necessary. And if you can afford it, spend the time and money to speed up the process. So some pieces you might have to outsource out, in order for you to get it done in that short-term goal. And I also say get good at one thing and focus on the other stuff later. Another tip to getting organized and avoiding overwhelm is writing things out and then schedule it. So when I say write things out, I mean write that laundry list of things that you need to get done and start to schedule those things. So I personally don't schedule all hard things to do at one particular time. I think that it's important to have balance. So the things that take a lot of effort for me, I schedule them out and I put them on certain days or in certain months or what have you. But I don't schedule all hard things at one time, because what I found is that for me personally, I do my best work before 2:00 p.m., which means that I wake up super early and I'm super productive. But I'm also a person that eats lunch around 2:00 p.m. So if you're anything like me, I get hangry. So I try to do as much as I can before 2:00 p.m. After that, it might be those lighter tasks like emails or outreach or certain things like that. So you want to write things out and then schedule them, but also have a balance of getting hard things done and lighter tasks done, because you have to, the point of me giving you these tips is that we have to be honest with who we are and how we operate. So for me, I operate best before 2:00 p.m. And an example of that would be the podcast management process. So as I mentioned before, I schedule my podcast recordings during certain seasons, because for me as an introvert, it takes me a lot of effort to, communicate and talk with people. I love doing it, but it takes me a lot of energy. So I have to mentally prepare myself for those things. And then there are times when I'm in my creative mode where I love just writing things out. So those might be the times where I work with my team or I do it myself, as in writing show notes, writing emails, and all of those things. So it's about writing things out and scheduling when you're going to do those things. And then another thing is that if you can't do it, and this is about being honest with ourselves, if you can't do it, you have two choices. Either you hire it out or you hold off on doing it. And you have to be honest or you will continue to procrastinate. And again, I use myself as an example earlier. When I felt like I didn't want to do something or something was too large, I procrastinated on doing it. So one of the things was the course. So I had to outsource certain parts of the course because it became overwhelming for me. Now, what I did have to do is create a budget on how was I going to be able to afford to hire these things out. If I could not afford to hire them out, my other thing was either I was going to hold off on it. So, for example, I have been working on this course for months, and there was a time where I did have to create this strategy in order to be able to create a budget to finance outsourcing these things out. And in the meantime, what did I do? I held off on it and I scheduled it for another time. So there's nothing wrong with holding off on things, especially if you want to have it done right. And when I say done right, I'm not talking about being perfect, but you know what it means to have something done right. For me, it's important for me if I'm charging people for something to make sure that I give them a quality product and I do so with integrity. So for me, I would rather just hold off on doing it until it's done right. So that is about, if you can't hire it out, if you can't do it, hire it out or hold off on it. And I want to note here that this is not about if you're fully capable of doing something and choosing not to do it. It's about if you just don't have the capacity to do it. So sometimes we procrastinate on doing things that we can do, and we don't do them because of we're saying yes to a lot of things that are not helping us reach those goals in our business. So this goes back to prioritizing and scheduling those things that matter, and prioritizing getting this done in your business because it's going to allow you to reach that goal. So again, this is not the same as if you're fully capable of doing something, meaning if you're not managing your time properly and you're not able to do it because you're not managing your time properly. It's about being able to do it and then still choosing not to because you're prioritizing something else that's not as important. And another thing about hiring things out, one of the things that I will say is that you have to learn that just because you hire things out, it doesn't mean that it has to be long term. So sometimes it might be project based, because I know I dealt with this in the beginning, and maybe you dealt with it, or maybe you haven't. But if you have, I thought, wow, when you're hiring somebody, that means I gotta keep them on long term. No, you can absolutely hire somebody for a short-term project. So do not let that stop you. It can be project-based. And then another thing that allows you to be organized in your business is that you have to track and document. So what you want to do is, especially if you're a 1 to 2 person team, now is the perfect time for you to begin to write out your processes and get organized and start to track, how long are these things taking me to do it. Now, I want to tell you, before you start doing this, it is a lot of work, but you must take a deep breath and understand, again, the bigger picture, because once it's done, you don't have to do it again. At least you don't for a while. And if you do have to do it again, what you do is you go in and you make small edits, but you're not starting from scratch. So really, really, really get in the habit of writing out things and your processes and tracking how long things are taking you. So what I like to do in Black to Business, as I mentioned, right now I've been in a season of getting more help and hiring and delegating things. So what I did before is that I would do things, track myself doing things between 3 to 4 times, and then I take it and get an average of that. And I would say, okay, this is how long this is taking me. When someone is, first starting, it's going to take them probably twice as long to do it. So giving them that grace to do it. And then as they become familiar, they get quicker at doing it. Another thing is that this allows me, I think about, this might be a lot of work on the front end, but it'll pay off on the back end. So sometimes I want to procrastinate and not do it, in terms of like, I introduce something new, like a new tool or something, and I don't want to write it down, but I think, what if I got somebody on my team to do this tomorrow? I would do better by tracking and writing down this process now versus going back and forth with them on emails. So it might take some time now, but you'll be grateful for it later. And then the other thing I'll say is that you want to find a robust resource and use it. So this has been so key for Black to Business, because one of the things is you want to avoid having too many tools to use. So I'll use an example. So with Black to Business, we have a project management software that we use, and I love it. And I talk about it all the time on the show, and a lot of other guests love it. But we use ClickUp a lot. And one of the things I like about ClickUp is its integration with a lot of other tools, but also the fact that the platform in itself has a lot of resources and tools on its own. So one of the things is they allow you to do forms. We used to use Typeform, and we still do for some things, or we still use Google Form. So we had Google Form we were using at one point, and we were using Typeform. And what we did was we just transferred, especially the podcast onboarding process, we transferred all of those forms and use ClickUp now. Because what happens is you have so many logins, so many tools that you are using, and imagine the amount of overwhelm that can cause, not only for you, but for other people who are on your team. So if you learn this is, get a tool, get a robust system, and learn that thing inside and out. So I've cut out a lot of platforms because of this. Another tool that I love is Zoom and Loom. And I love Zoom because there are platforms like Google Meet, but I would just rather use Zoom because those are also the things I use for my webinars and such. But I use that for my meeting as well versus Google Meet, because it might be easier and might be, free to use Google Meet. However, for me, in order to minimize the amount of tools that I use, I would just rather stick with one platform and use Zoom. So I stick to learning the ins and outs of Zoom versus relying on another tool, even though we use Google Suite. I just think that when it comes to meetings and such, I have one sole focused platform. So that's what you have to think about. When it comes to certain things, this is the platform that I'm going to use for that thing. So when it comes to project management, I use ClickUp. When it comes to forms, I use ClickUp. When it comes to meetings, anything that involves a video, I use Zoom. And another thing is really knowing these tools inside and out. And you will find that it teaches you, how to be resourceful. So that's another thing, is find a robust resource and use it. And then one of the other things I would say is that if you can get ahead, do so. So if you have it in you to do more in your business, do it, because you never know when unexpected things might come up. So this is why batching is important. This is why batching is key. And I'll share a personal experience. So recently I lost someone very close to me. It was unexpectedly. And I was so, you're dealing with that grieving process. And I was so happy that there were parts of my business that I could just let go and grieve properly, because I had planned ahead. And there were some things in my business that I was like, oh, I was supposed to do this week in the midst of going through that, or that week going in the midst of it. But I'd already had it done because I had the capacity to do that. So imagine the thoughts of me not feeling that guilt of having to work in the midst of my grieving process, and just being able to be there with my family. So I say that to say, if you can plan ahead, do more, do it. Just again, make sure that you're practicing that self-care in the midst of the process, and you're not overextending yourself. So I know that when I was doing that, I wasn't overextending myself, because I had gotten to the point where I was outsourcing some things in my business, and it allowed me to focus on other things. So if you can plan ahead, do so, and batching is key. Now I want to end this off by giving you some of my favorite tools. I mentioned some of them that have been very useful for me. You can also go to blacktobusiness.com/tools, and I list a lot of the tools we use, or you can go to our website and click on the tools we use tab. But I list a lot of those tools that we use in Black to Business, so nothing is hidden, nothing is a secret for me. So some of my favorite tools, as I mentioned before, is Loom. And I love Loom not only because it allows me to create coursework and just show my screen and things like that, but I also love it because it helps me in training my assistants, and I can do quick videos and show them my processes behind the scenes, and they get it. They don't have to go back and forth with me on, a meeting, or we don't always have to get on a call or go back and forth in email and messaging. So that's one of my favorite tools. Another one of my favorite tools is LastPass. And I feel like LastPass should really, I don't even know if they have an affiliate link, but really they should sponsor us. Shout out to LastPass. If you have a connect with LastPass, let us know. But I love LastPass because it's a password management system. And not only do I use this internally, I use it personally, but basically I love it because it allows me to feel comfortable with storing my passwords in a secured space. And also when I'm working with contractors, how you have multiple logins, all I have to do is get their LastPass email address and send them the credentials for logging in. And it allows you to decide if you want to show them the password or not show them the password. And either way, they can still log into that platform. I will say this, when most people see these tools that we use, it makes us sound or seem so professional, which we are, but I always think about us operating in excellence and making things easier and seamless, because I hate doing admin work. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so detailed, because I'm like, what's gonna allow people not to bother me as much? So that's how I think about it. Another one of my favorite tools to stay organized is Dropbox. So I organize any important files, forms, videos, MP3s, all of that is used in Dropbox rather than having that on my personal computer and taking up storage. And so this is what allows me to stay organized and also sharing information with those inside and outside of the organization. And another thing I really, really love is Acuity, which is where we use for our scheduler, meeting schedulers, and also our onboarding process with our podcast guests. Some of the other things that are on my radar are Calendly, and I've been using Acuity so long and I've just gotten so used to it. However, I do love the fact that Calendly is Black owned, so I'm going to encourage you, try out Calendly. and I might be moving over to that soon, but for now, Acuity is working for us. And again, I want to encourage you to use what will work for you. But I do know things that are on my radar are Calendly, and then Undock is something that I heard about recently. Shout out to Jamar Johnson of Black Entrepreneur, a dear friend of mine. He put me on Undock. It is also Black owned, so I know that's UNDOCK. I've downloaded it, and I think I kind of like it because it shows like basically how even if you're typing in calendar or anything in an email, it basically suggests within the email, and I love that. So that's something that's on my radar again. Finally, these are some of the things that have really helped me to be organized and Black to business. And just as we continue to grow and me to become a better leader, I want to make sure that I'm leading by example, but also sharing with you all my progress. And again, if I'm led to do a solo episode, I definitely want to do them. And I want to know how you all like this episode. And if you want to hear more from me, what are some of the things that you want to hear? You can also email me directly at monique@blacktobusiness.com. I'm going to list in the show notes a lot of the resources that I mentioned here. And don't forget, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com/blacktobusiness. So thank you all so much for supporting us, listening. I hope that you found value in this conversation. And I can't wait to chat with you again next week, same time, same place, because we have another extra special episode coming up for you. Until next week.